Welcome to BIV Today, the daily podcast from the Newsroom of Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. The Business Council of British Columbia and Conference Board of Canada have in recent weeks indicated continued uncertainty, slight uncertainty anyway, among businesses in terms of the confidence they hold about the economy as the recovery continues in the pandemic. Federal leaders out on the campaign and provincial governments are pledging continued support for the small and medium-sized businesses and the sector there, but at different levels than at the start of the coronavirus. But it's a good time to take stock right now about what they face and what they're seeking. And one person who would hear about this is Kevin Hamoaka. He's the Senior Vice President of Commercial Banking at TD Bank. He's the first British Columbian-based person to hold this role. So we're going to be able to talk specifically about this province, I think. And he assumed the role during the pandemic. He joins me now. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Kirk. Really appreciate you having the time to sit down with me today.
You're back in the office, so that's great.
I am back in the office now. It's been good to be back, and sort of get a little more sense of normal than we've had over the past 18 months.
Yeah, and that's of course what small and medium-sized businesses are trying to achieve as well, particularly those that have workforces of a significant enough size that they have work sites, workplaces, particularly in the white-collar part of the economy, that have been working remotely in all of this. What are you picking up on that you think are their main concerns at the moment?
It's interesting. I mean, until probably the last 2 days, my sense has been that, British Columbia has been quite well positioned when we look across the country from an economic recovery standpoint. And I think that if you're looking at the numbers that are coming off with Stats Can in the last couple of days, it seems like there's been a little bit of a dip. And, when I'm talking to our clients, I think, they have some macro concerns still in recovery. And I think, the most important thing to look at is like, depending on people's position, and what industry they're in, I think they're at different stages. And, certainly I think, the hospitality and tourism industry, they're not back yet. They're still not operating at full capacity. There's, a number of sectors of our economy that I think, weathered the storm quite well. And, some other sectors of the economy that, really accelerated their growth, but a couple themes in my mind that I think are top of mind for our small to medium-sized business owners is just labor. I think as much as, the labor supply is back, to pre-pandemic levels in a number of sectors, it's just really hard to attract talent. And I think part of that's immigration.
You ascribe immigration on this one, and some people have also pointed to some of the actual government programs of income support during this period of time too, and whether that has caused people to basically take time away from the workforce and all of that. So, if you take those two factors and put them together, does that lead us to believe that actually, if these programs relent a little bit more, that we'll see a reasonable flood back into the market of labor, or is this really a sticking point here?
I'm not sure if it's a generational shift, if that's what we're getting at, and what people, and certainly I think, when we talk to our employees and when I talk to customers, people are taking restock of their lives and what's important to them, and it's causing them pause. And, and that's getting back to, the start of the pandemic. I think it was tough on people, right, in order to balance work and life and family and all those factors that went together. And so, it does resonate with me. Do I think as some of these government support programs pull back, we'll see more people come to the workforce? Well, I think the numbers are showing that the supply of labor is there. But I think people are moving around the industry and, finding other places. And so, you're finding shortages in one areas and surpluses in others. And, I think the economy's just kind of come back to balance a little bit before we can, really make conclusions on that. The other piece as we look into heightened customer concerns around things and heightened concerns around the economy is really just supply of product too. If I think if you look at the numbers in and around, what container costs are for shipping, if you can get product, I think, it's up in some cases 10 times, and for some of these, products, we're looking at the cost of shipping is more than the cost of actually the product itself. And so, I think, the combination of both labor and supply is really putting pressure and we're seeing some inflationary pressure on prices and that also causes people to pause.
Do you feel like we're getting the total picture on inflation? Is there a fair amount of hidden inflation where companies are, for the time being, by virtue of some of the government programming, kind of almost suppressing or concealing the price increases, the cost increases in some of their goods and services, while they've got some support? When in fact, if that support disappears, we'll see some goods and services shoot up in terms of cost.
Yeah, and that's not something that maybe I would be the best to answer on with that respect.
Okay.
I'm not an economist, but from what I can see from our clients, I think the reality. If I just take trade contracting or the construction industry for general, I think there is real pressure, with some of the projects that are going on, where they're fixed into prices and fixed into costing, and they're seeing escalation on their underlying supply. That's going to put pressure for them on the economy and how we move. Do I think at the end of the day there is going to be in the short term some inflationary pressure? I do. I do.
Yeah. When you're talking to small and medium-sized businesses, many of them, of course, offer entry-level positions to people. Again, are we looking at a serious amount of pressure on wages in order to get that workforce back?
Well, I mean, the only real, I guess, example I would have of that, my wife's got a family business, and they have, in the hospitality industry, and I think the biggest challenge for them is labor right now, and getting people back into more of a full time workforce there, and I think money in my mind is secondary for a lot of people making these choices today. And I think it's just going to take some time in order for them to actually make the life choice of coming back and valuing what's important to them. I mean, if I look at the demographic of the individuals that are in their business or coming back to that, I think there's a lot of choice on what they want to do, whether it's school or whether other forms of education or trades, or I think they're really taking stock of life and figuring out what they want to do.
And I've talked to business leaders during the pandemic who had to reduce salaries and therefore move people down to 4 days or 3 days a week. Quite a few of them report back that some of their employees actually got used to having a smaller salary, like the idea of having an extra day a week, for instance, where
Yeah.
they're not working. What does that speak to, do you think, in terms of the flexibility that businesses are going to need to have, and for that matter, government policy need to have, in order to make sure that we somehow accommodate what will perhaps emerge in the way of a workforce that wants a little bit less time at the work site?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do, and certainly at TD, we're exploring different ways of how we work. And when I talk to some of our customers, the idea of having a 4 day work week resonates with some people. At TD here, we're looking at the way we work and how we work in order to support our employees. And I don't think it's a one size fits all. There's still a number of people that work at TD in business banking that value being in an office space, value working 5 days a week, and sort of that 8 to 4:30 type role, and they enjoy that. There's other people that want the flexibility, and I think it's upon us to look forward as organizations to say how do we best meet not only our employee needs but our customer needs, and able to deliver services in the way they expect. And and that's a change for us too, because our employees are mapping back to what our customer needs are, right? And so if our customers want to operate 4 days a week, that's something we're going to have to get used to as well.
I haven't heard either of the central banks on each side of the border yet utter a peep about interest rates moving up anytime soon. Are those low interest rates pretty crucial to sustain some kind of a decent recovery here?
I mean, again, I'm not an economist. And so, I'm going to have to maybe take a pass on answering that one. I certainly see the economy as it is today. And, over the last couple of days, the numbers that came out that were sort of, are less than what we expected on growth in GDP. And so, my sense would be is that, the central banks do take a pause on what they're looking at, and looking more to target the longer term as we get into the recovery.
Yeah, I guess maybe my question that's more direct and more relevant in your role as a senior VP of commercial banking is
Yeah.
what do you think banks will continue to need to do in all of this in order to nurture the recovery?
I think we need to lend, and that's I think where it is today. I think there's plenty of capital in the market. I think that both businesses and consumers are sitting on balances, kind of waiting patiently to see how the recovery sort of pans out. If you look at the statistics on savings rates as well as draw credit, you're seeing sort of peaks in savings rates and sort of dips. And what you look at, if you look at I was reading an article the other day on just visa utilization rates. And so it seems that there is capital sitting on the sideline waiting for investment. The big key for us as banks is, we continue to support the economy is, providing credit and availability to businesses in order to grow.
Yeah, and at rates that I guess are pretty well in recent times, as low as they've ever been. When you consider also that the amount of not necessarily forgiveness, but at least a little bit of forbearance for the time being around some of the difficulties that companies have had in servicing their debt. Again, is that something that banks just have to kind of sustain for a while yet?
I do think in certain industries we need to continue to be patient. A number of industries have rebounded and actually really, thrived during this time. And,
Mhm.
if you touch on, some of those industries, whether it be tech on communications, how we're communicating today, or the grocery industry, a number of food and beverage industries, that are really firing on all cylinders. I mean, or, some delivery businesses, right? I mean, yeah, I don't think there's many people that can say they're not on a first name basis with their Amazon driver today. So, those type of industries I think are back. But certainly I think when you look at tourism and hospitality, I think there's a great deal of patience that we need to remain in those spaces in order to provide people the opportunity to get back.
Yeah, the uncertainty that's in the system also appears to be predicated, as you indicated earlier, on a labor shortage that is pinned to the fact that we haven't been able to bring a lot of people to Canada in the last year and a half. How how crucial are your customers saying it is for us to start seeing a return to immigration levels and even larger immigration levels than we've experienced?
Yeah, I haven't specifically talked just in and around immigration directly with any clients. My sense is that we certainly in BC we do benefit from immigration in that sort of 50,000 a year range, and that's in a number of sectors. I think if you look at the agriculture sector, I think that there's a lot of dependence there on having foreign workers come in order to support that business. So I think as we grow, we're going to need to find the employment base somewhere. And as we're at almost sort of pre-pandemic levels of employment now, as our economy grows, there's only a need to bring more people in.
Okay, so as a journalist, we tend to focus on the negative, but I want to ask you to conclude here with
Yeah.
what do you think has worked? What has been successful in the way that policies have been rolled out in the pandemic to deal with small and medium-sized businesses? What's worked?
I don't necessarily think it's a policy thing. I think it's, more of a general community thing that I think's worked, especially as I look for the banks. I mean, if I look at, the sense of community we built with our customers around, patience and how we grow, I think, the most interesting thing to me was how coordinated we were, as a financial sector, to provide, relief, to our customers in regards to mortgage payments or loan payments, as well as to try and stimulate the economy. And I think that that's the piece that I look from a policy standpoint that maybe worked is, it's almost that whole idea of, instant evolution, right? Like we can make these decisions very quickly to support the economy and support businesses and individuals when we need to, right? And I think that that's what happened here is that we were able to be coordinated in a very fast way in order to provide individuals as well as businesses the support they needed to continue on.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic hasn't been bad for the banking sector by any means, but how important was it, do you think, that the sector and its stability um, offer that kind of service into the community in terms of stabilizing any recovery that we were going to have.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part was I don't think we really had another option, and I don't think we had much to base it on, right? I think what was quite surprising to everybody is it's almost like a situation when that happens, you prepare for the worst, and we're bankers, we manage risk, and so we look at what the downside is, as you said, as much as we're optimists, we look at the downside in banking, and I think we were remarkably surprised by what came out of this in a relatively short period of time. And I think that just goes to the resilience of our economy, especially in BC.
Yeah. When you take a look at the last two crises, the banking sector actually has navigated them extremely well by I think world standards in this case here. What do you think, if anything, Kevin, has been the learning for your company and for the sector in these last almost 18 months now?
I think, for us, like at the micro level, I think making decisions locally, the organization does a really good job, especially at TD, by putting decisions in local leaders' hands. And, each different geography has its own separate set of challenges based on the industries and the people that they manage. And so, I think that that's a big thing that helped us through all of this. The other thing that I think we look at is that the banking sector in Canada is rather well capitalized. I think our capital ratios are quite strong, and that allows us to take economic shocks and step right. And so I think that helps us from a governance standpoint in general.
Yeah, it's been a very good status report. Really good insights into the relationship between banks, small and medium-sized businesses, which, as you know, if they don't recover, we don't recover. So good to talk to you today.
Great to talk to you too, Kirk. Thank you very much.
Kevin Hamoaka is the Senior Vice President of Commercial Banking at TD Bank. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief of Business of Vancouver. Thanks a lot for watching.